Hello everyone, in this video we will see summary of chapter 1, a trump of surgery. First of all, we will see what is the character sketch. So the story recounts the episode when the narrator, a veterinary surgeon, saves the life of a listless listless means dull dog Tricky by hospitalizing means helping him to prevent him from being overfed by his wealthy owner. Mrs. Pamphry, which was only worsening his condition. So, this story will tell us about how a surgeon saves a dog from being overfed by his master or his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey. Now we will study about the character sketch. So James Herriot. James Herriot is a veterinary surgeon. Veterinary surgeon is a person who sees animals. So veterinary surgeon who proves to be capable doctor and a wise individual. He is an animal lover and a caring guardian. So this is James Herriot, who is a veterinary surgeon. Next, Mrs. Pumphrey. Mrs. Pumphrey is a wealthy single woman. She is very much attached to her dog, Tricky. And Tricky is the dog of Mrs. Pumphrey, who is very wealthy lady. And Tricky is a lazy and a fat dog who loves food. He is very fond of his owner. He turns out to be energetic and lively after recovering from his illness. So, in this chapter, we will study how the dog named Tricky fell ill and how he recovered from his illness with the help of veterinary surgeon James Herriot. So now we will study summary of the chapter. So in the first part we will study James inquires about Tricky. तो जो जेम्स होते हैं, जेम्स हैरियट द वेटरनरी सर्जन will inquire about Tricky. It was when James was driving that he saw Mrs. Pumphrey and Tricky walking down the road. So when he was driving his car, he saw the dog and dog's owner on the street. He stopped his car to see how Tricky was doing. He was shocked to see that he had become a fat like a sausage and was lacking energy. James was very shocked seeing that the dog has become very fat who used to be very active. He advised Mrs. Pumphrey to immediately stop giving the dog extra snacks between meals. He also wanted her to make him exercise daily along with a strict diet in order to improve his health. Mrs. Pumphrey confessed that it was very difficult for her to do so, but she agreed upon giving it a try and walked off with Tricky. So the doctor advised Mrs. Pumphrey to give less food to dog so that dog might be more energetic and will not fell prone to any disease. In the next part we will see Harriet received an unexpected call. So Mrs. Pumphrey called James Harriet the vet hurriedly, as Tricky had refused to eat food. Her concern grew even more when he had bouts of vomiting. James drove to Mrs. Pumphrey's house with a firm mindset that the only way to cure Pumphrey to hospitalize him for fortnight for observations so that next we will see so that the proper treatment can follow. Although it broke Mrs. Pumphrey's heart, she allowed James to take Tricky along with him to his surgery. He carried the dog wrapped in a blanket to his car. All the house helpers started to get together the blankets, rugs, bowls, coats, etc. that they thought Tricky might need during his hospitalization. James started to drive off as he knew that his car could not carry so many things. All that Mrs. Pumphrey managed to put were a few of his coats. Tricky left for the hospital, leaving his caretaker behind in tears. And in the next part we will see Tricky's stay and the recovery at the hospital, how Tricky will stay in the hospital and how he will recover from all of his fatness or obesity, we can say. Then Tricky laid motionless on the bed that the vet made for him on the first day. He was put on a water diet for almost 2 days. So for almost 2 days, the dog will not be given any food and he will be on water diet. Even the household dogs didn't bother him as he seemed uninterested in anything. After 2 days, he started responding a bit. On the following day, he whimpered. Whimpered means cried a low and weak sound. Trotted. Trotted means walked briskly. Means walk slowly, slowly. And joined the hound. Hound is a hunting dog that is very big in the garden. So after few days, the Tricky, the dog which was used to be very lazy, started playing with doctor's dog in the garden. Later on the third day, he ran with enthusiasm when the food was served. He also gulped down the extra food that was put out for him. His recovery was speeding up. He had started running all the day long and found joy in being bowled over the squashed. In spite of being a high maintenance dog, he had fitted in well with a gang of shabby and unkempt ones. He used to be in a very good position, the dog Tricky, and then while he was with the vet, he managed to do well with all other dogs who were no so wealthy, or their owners were not so wealthy. So he managed to do well with other dogs also. In the next part, we will see Mrs. Pumphrey's concern. Now Mrs. Pumphrey will start to concern about her dog. Mrs. Pumphrey used to phone the vet's clinic several times a day. So she used to call doctor asking how the dog was doing and so on. She was keen to record his recovery and maintenance at short intervals. James brushed away her questions about Tricky's dressing according to the weather, but he didn't fail to assure her that Tricky was out of danger. Upon learning about Tricky's improving health, Mrs. Pumphrey started standing additional food items, wine, and brandy for Tricky, although this was not required, so the vet and his partner consumed these additional items themselves. So, when Mrs. Pumphrey was calling again and again for asking for the health of his dog Tricky, and when she came to know that Tricky was recovering, she started sending extra food, which was not obviously vet will not give that extra food to the dog. Then that extra food was wine and all other additional good food. So the vet and other people around him with him started consuming that food themselves. Now Tricky's better condition, we will see how Tricky condition will started being better, and he was feeling quite good now. After 2 weeks, James called up Mrs. Pumphrey to inform that Tricky was fit and could go home. So after 2 weeks, James called Mrs. Pumphrey that now Tricky is fit and he can go home with her. Mrs. Pumphrey reached the surgery within half an hour, while the chauffeur, means driver, held the door open. She inquired about Tricky's actual condition. She was concerned about his well-being and wanted to be sure about it. James found Tricky playing with the pack. He had become healthy and strong in his 2 weeks stay. As James carried Tricky out of his mistress, he jumped off his arms and landed in his mistress' lap. She was very happy at finding Tricky as excited as he used to be. He licked her face and wagged his tail. Wagged means that the dog, that how dogs swing, used to swing their tail. That means wagged. The chauffeur and the vet settled the dog's stuff in the car, while Mrs. Pumphrey thanked the vet for the trump of surgery. So the name of the chapter was based on the trump of surgery, that nowhere was an actual surgery. It was just a process of not giving excessive food to the dog and let him play with other dogs and treat him, and the doctor, that vet, treat him with only water diet. So the chapter is complete. Thank you so much. Chapter A, actually, this is a summary of the chapter, and now it's complete. Thank you.